A wealthy family humiliated an elderly janitor at their daughter's private school, demanding he be fired for being too old and dirty. When they discovered his true identity 24 hours later, they begged for forgiveness, but it was too late. This is the story of James Mitchell, a 72-year-old man who spent his days mopping floors and emptying trash cans at Riverside Preparatory Academy, one of the most exclusive private schools in Connecticut. To most people who passed him in the hallways, he was invisible. Just an old janitor doing a menial job? The wealthy parents barely acknowledged his existence. Their children were taught not to bother him. He was part of the background, like the furniture or the walls, but James Mitchell was far from ordinary. And when one particularly cruel family tried to have him fired, they triggered a chain of events that would expose a truth so shocking. It would make national news and teach everyone involved a lesson they'd never forget. This is a story about judgment, humility, and the dangerous assumptions we make about people based on appearances. Every morning at 5 a.m., James Mitchell arrived at Riverside Prep. He'd put on his navy blue janitor's uniform, gather his cleaning supplies, and begin his rounds through the pristine hallways of this $50,000 per year institution. He moved slowly. At 72, his knees weren't what they used to be. His hands, weathered and scarred from decades of work, trembled slightly as he pushed his cleaning cart. Some days the arthritis made it hard to grip the mop handle, but James never complained. He showed up every day with a quiet dignity that most people were too busy to notice. The students at Riverside Prep came from money: old money, new money, tech money, investment banking money. Their parents drove Range Rovers and Teslas. They lived in estates with names instead of addresses. They vacationed in places most Americans had never heard of, and they barely saw James at all. When parents picked up their children, they'd walk right past him without acknowledgement. When he cleaned the bathroom while they waited in the hallway, they'd continue their phone conversations about stock portfolios and country club memberships as if he didn't exist. But James didn't mind. He'd learned long ago that invisibility could be a gift. It allowed him to observe, to listen, to understand people in ways they'd never expect from just a janitor. There was one student, though, who was different, a quiet 10-year-old boy named Tommy Chen. Tommy had been struggling in school, getting bullied by some of the wealthier kids who mocked his second-hand clothes, and the fact that his parents were on partial scholarship. James had noticed Tommy eating lunch alone, sitting on the floor in a corner of the hallway during recess, while other kids played outside. One day, James sat down next to him. "Mind if I take my break here? My knees need a rest." Tommy had looked surprised that an adult was speaking to him, let alone sitting with him. "You like science?" James asked, noticing Tommy's astronomy book. Tommy nodded shyly. "Space is fascinating," James said. "Did you know that the stars you see tonight might not even exist anymore? Their light travels so far that by the time we see it, some of those stars have already died." Tommy's eyes lit up. "Really? How do you know that?" James smiled. "Oh, I've read a bit about these things over the years." From that day on, Tommy and James shared a quiet friendship. During James's breaks, they'd talk about planets, black holes, quantum physics. James would recommend books from the school library. Tommy started doing better in his classes, but not everyone appreciated this friendship. Victoria and Richard Harrison were exactly the type of people you'd expect at a school like Riverside. Prep, generational wealth, social connections, and an overwhelming sense of entitlement. Their daughter Madison was in Tommy's class. She was a mediocre student, despite having private tutors for every subject. But her parents donated enough money to the school that her grades somehow always ended up acceptable. One Tuesday afternoon, Victoria Harrison arrived early to pick up Madison. She found her daughter upset in the hallway. "What's wrong, darling?" "Tommy Chen beat me on the science test again." "It's not fair. He's poor and on scholarship, and he's making me look bad." Victoria's face hardened. In her world, people like Tommy were supposed to know their place. They certainly weren't supposed to outperform her daughter. "Don't worry, sweetheart. Mommy will handle this." As they walked toward the exit, Victoria saw something that made her stop cold. James, the janitor, was sitting on a bench talking to Tommy. They were looking at a book together, both smiling. "Is that the janitor?" Victoria asked the school receptionist. "Why is he talking to students?" "Oh, that's Mr. James. He's harmless. Sometimes helps kids with their homework during his breaks. Helps them? Victoria's voice rose. A janitor? Helping with academics. What are his qualifications? Does he even have a high school diploma? The receptionist looked uncomfortable. I don't know his background, ma'am. But he's never caused any problems. Victoria marched over to where James and Tommy were sitting. Excuse me, what exactly do you think you're doing with this student? James looked up calmly. Just chatting about astronomy, ma'am. The boy has a curious mind. I don't think it's appropriate for the custodial staff to be fraternizing with students. Don't you have floors to clean? Tommy's face fell. James gently closed the book. You're right, ma'am. I should get back to work. But Victoria wasn't finished. As James stood up, his weathered hands shaking slightly, she wrinkled her nose. And frankly, you look like you can barely do your job. How old are you? 70, 80? You can barely walk straight. And your uniform is filthy. James's uniform was in fact clean, but it was old and worn from years of washing. His hands bore the stains of cleaning chemicals that never quite came out. I'm 72, ma'am, and I assure you I do my job well. Not well enough. Look at you. You're dirty, you're ancient, and now you're bothering students. I'm going to speak to the headmaster about replacing you with someone more appropriate. Tommy spoke up, his voice small. But Mr. James is nice. He helps me. Tommy dear, go wait outside, Victoria interrupted. Adults are talking. The next morning, Victoria and Richard Harrison marched into Headmaster Robert Thornton's office with a formal complaint. That janitor needs to be terminated immediately, Victoria announced. He's ancient, barely mobile, and inappropriate with students. My Madison feels uncomfortable with him lurking around. Headmaster Thornton, a man who'd been navigating entitled parents for 20 years, chose his words carefully. Mr. Mitchell has been with us for 5 years. We've never had any complaints about his conduct. Well, you have one now, Richard Harrison interjected. We donate $100,000 annually to this school. I think our concerns should be taken seriously. Thornton's jaw tightened. The unspoken threat was clear. Fire the janitor or lose the donation. I'll look into the matter, Thornton said carefully. Don't look into it. Do it, Victoria snapped. He's a liability. Old Dirty probably can't pass a background check. Replace him with someone younger and more professional. After they left, Thornton sat in his office, conflicted. He picked up James's employee file, remarkably thin for someone who'd worked there 5 years. In fact, James had specifically requested minimal paperwork when he was hired. That afternoon, Thornton called James to his office. James, I'm sorry. The Harrisons are pushing hard for your termination. They're threatening to pull their donation. James nodded slowly. I understand, Robert. Money talks. I don't want to do this. You're a good man. But the board is pressuring me. That donation funds 3 full scholarships, I know. James stood up with some difficulty. It's all right. Some things are more important than my pride. You're not angry? James smiled sadly. I've learned that entitled people rarely change until life forces them to. Maybe this will be that moment for them. Or maybe not. Either way, I'll be fine. What will you do? Oh, I'll find something. I always do. What Headmaster Thornton didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that James Mitchell didn't need this job. He'd never needed this job. The next morning, the Harrisons woke up to their phone ringing incessantly. Victoria answered, irritated. Mrs. Harrison, this is Jennifer Martinez from the New York Times. We're running a story tomorrow about Dr. James Mitchell's retirement from public service, and we understand you were involved in his dismissal from Riverside Prep. Would you care to comment? Victoria's blood ran cold. Dr. James Mitchell, I think you have the wrong person. We had a janitor fired, not a doctor. Ma'am, they're the same person, Dr. James Mitchell, former neurosurgeon, pioneered 3 groundbreaking surgical techniques, performed over 2,000 successful brain surgeries, founded the Mitchell Foundation, which provides free medical care to underserved communities. He's been working as a janitor at your daughter's school as part of his personal philosophy about staying humble and connected to everyday people. The phone slipped from Victoria's hand. Within an hour, the story was everywhere, not just in the Times, but on every major news network, social media, everywhere. The headlines were devastating. Renowned neurosurgeon fired from janitor job after. Wealthy parents complain he's too old and dirty. Dr. James Mitchell, the millionaire surgeon. Who chose to mop floors? Wealthy family demands firing of dirty janitor. Turns out he's a medical legend. The story revealed everything. James Mitchell had been one of the most respected neurosurgeons in the country. He'd graduated top of his class from Johns Hopkins Medical School at age 26. By 35, he was performing surgeries other doctors deemed impossible. By 50, he'd saved thousands of lives and earned millions. But 15 years ago, after performing a particularly difficult surgery on a young girl from a poor family, James had an epiphany. The girl's mother worked 3 jobs, but still couldn't afford the hospital bills. James paid them himself and started questioning what success really meant. He realized he'd spent decades in elite circles, surrounded by wealth and privilege, disconnected from the everyday struggles most people faced. He decided to change that. James retired from surgery at 57, still at the peak of his abilities. He took the money he'd earned and created the Mitchell Foundation, which funded free clinics in underserved areas. Then he did something unusual. He started working regular jobs, first as a grocery store clerk, then a delivery driver, then a janitor. He worked these jobs not because he needed money, but because he wanted to understand life from different perspectives. He wanted to see how society treated its invisible workers. I learned more about human nature in 5 years of janitorial work than I did in 30 years of surgery, James had told an interviewer years earlier. When you're a doctor, everyone respects you. When you're a janitor, you discover who has true character and who doesn't. The backlash against the Harrisons was immediate and brutal. Richard Harrison's investment firm faced a social media firestorm. Clients began pulling their accounts. Business partners distanced themselves. The firm lost $20 million in a single week. Victoria's social circle evaporated overnight. The country club quietly asked them to resign their membership. Charity boards removed her from committees. Friends stopped returning calls. Madison was bullied mercilessly at school. Kids who had once tried to befriend her now avoided her. Someone spray-painted the family that bullied a hero on their fence. Desperate, Victoria tried to apologize. She called every number she could find for James Mitchell. She sent letters. She even showed up at the Mitchell Foundation offices. She was politely but firmly turned away. James finally agreed to one phone conversation. "Dr. Mitchell, I'm so sorry. I didn't know who you were." "If I had known." "That's exactly the problem, Mrs. Harrison," James interrupted gently. "You're sorry because of who I am. But you should have treated me with respect regardless of who I was. The janitor you thought I was deserved the same basic human dignity as the doctor I used to be. Please, we're losing everything. My husband's business, our social standing, our—" "Mrs. Harrison, I didn't take those things from you. Your own actions did. You judged someone by their appearance, decided they were beneath you, and used your wealth as a weapon to hurt them. The world simply found out who you really are. What can I do to make this right?" James was quiet for a moment. "Genuinely change. Not because you're facing consequences, but because you understand why what you did was wrong. Teach your daughter that every person has value regardless of their job or bank account. Volunteer at a homeless shelter. Work in a soup kitchen. See people, really see them for who they are, not what they do. And then you'll forgive us?" "Mrs. Harrison, I already forgave you the moment you tried to have me fired. Forgiveness isn't about you earning it. But forgiveness doesn't mean freedom from consequences. You have to live with what you've done, and that's going to be uncomfortable for a while, maybe permanently. That's how we learn." A week after the news broke, James received a letter at his foundation office. It was from Tommy Chen, written in careful handwriting. "Dear Mr. James, I know now I should call you Dr. Mitchell, but you'll always be Mr. James to me. I'm sorry people were so mean to you. I'm sorry Mrs. Harrison got you fired. I miss talking to you about space. My mom says you're famous and important. I always knew you were special. But not because you're a doctor. Because you were kind to me when no one else was. Because you didn't care that my clothes were old or that other kids made fun of me. You just liked talking about stars. That's more important than any surgery. I want to be like you when I grow up. Not a doctor. I'm not good at blood. But someone who's kind to people everyone else ignores. Someone who sees people for real. Thank you for being my friend. Love, Tommy P.S. I got an A+ on my astronomy project. I couldn't have done it without you." James read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down his face. This was why he'd taken that janitor job. Not for the Harrisons of the world. they'd likely never truly change. But for kids like Tommy, who just needed someone to believe in them, he framed the letter and put it on his office wall, right next to his medical degrees. 6 months later, James received a call from Headmaster Thornton. "James, I have a proposition. The board has asked me to offer you a position at Riverside Prep, not as a janitor, as our new director of student mentorship. Full-time salary, benefits, your own office. You'd work with students who are struggling, particularly scholarship students who need advocates. What about the Harrisons? They withdrew Madison from school, and honestly, their departure opened doors. Other families realized what you'd been doing, working that job to stay connected to real life, and they were inspired. We've had a dozen wealthy parents volunteer to mentor scholarship students. Your example changed our entire school culture." James accepted the position. He spent the next years mentoring hundreds of students, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds. Tommy went on to attend MIT on a full scholarship, studying astrophysics. The Harrisons? Richard's business never fully recovered. They had to sell their estate and downsize significantly. Victoria did eventually start volunteering at a homeless shelter, whether from genuine change or desperate image rehabilitation. No one knew. Madison transferred to public school, which turned out to be the best thing for her. Away from the entitled bubble of Riverside Prep, she learned humility. She's now studying social work in college. Sometimes James would think about that day Victoria called him dirty and too old. In a strange way, he was grateful. The incident revealed who people truly were and gave him an even bigger platform to make a difference. This story teaches us something profound about human nature. We judge people constantly. By their clothes, their jobs, their age, their appearance. We create hierarchies in our minds where some people matter more than others. We treat service workers as invisible, elderly people as irrelevant, and anyone we deem beneath us as unworthy of basic respect. But here's the truth. You never know who you're really talking to. That janitor might be a retired neurosurgeon. That cashier might have a master's degree. That homeless person might be a veteran. That elderly person you're dismissing might have lived a life more remarkable than you can imagine. But even if they're not, even if that janitor is just a janitor, that cashier just a cashier, that homeless person just down on their luck, they still deserve your respect. Their worth isn't determined by their resume. It's inherent in their humanity. James Mitchell didn't need to be a famous doctor to deserve kindness. He deserved it because he was a human being doing honest work. The Harrisons learned this lesson the hard way. Don't wait for life to teach you through humiliation. Learn it now through choice. If this story moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs this reminder. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that challenge how we see the world and the people in it. In the comments, tell us, have you ever made assumptions about someone that turned out to be completely wrong? Or have you been judged unfairly? Share your story. Remember, treat everyone with dignity. The janitor, the server, the cashier, the elderly person, everyone. Not because of who they might be, but because of who you choose to be. Respect isn't earned by status. It's given through character. Until next time, choose kindness. Choose humility. Choose to see people, really see them for who they are.